For the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was a wrong decision, period. There's no excuse for that. But again, I wasn't there, but I'm just telling you, from what we know, that we believe there should have been an entry at that as soon as you can. Hey, when there's an active shooter, the rules change. It's no longer, okay, it's no longer a barricaded subject. We don't have time. You don't worry about outer perimeters. And by the way, Texas embraces active shooter training, active shooter certification, and that doctrine requires officers. We don't care what agency you're from. You don't have to have a leader on the scene. Every officer lines up, stacks up, goes and finds where those rounds are being fired at, and keeps shooting until the subject is dead, period.
Well, that didn't happen, obviously. So for more on this, let's bring in ABC News senior investigative correspondent Aaron Katersky, White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks, along with ABC News contributor Jared Bergman. He is a former San Bernardino, California police chief. And I just want to start with Aaron. We've just heard the Texas Department of Public Safety chief, Stephen McGraw, say it was wrong not to engage the shooter once he was locked in a classroom. And I just want to know, after hearing these new revelations, what kind of questions do you have? Because it seems like there's still a lot of unanswered questions about how this catastrophic failure occurred.
One big question, Terry, I think, is what led the incident commander, the head of the Uvalde Independent School District Police Department, to make the decision to wait 35 minutes from the time the tactical team from Customs and Border Protection arrived on scene to actually send them in to breach the classroom? What made him assume that he had time to wait? He transitioned the incident from an active shooter to a barricaded situation, and according to the Department of Public Safety, believed that he had time. What gave him that inclination that he had time and that there were no more children at risk, when we know from 911 calls that people inside classroom 112 and 111, those adjoining classrooms, were making calls, pleading for help, and informing operators that there were, in fact, shots being fired? It was, as the Department of Public Safety head Stephen McGraw said with some understatement, not the right decision.
The right decision. And I would like to go to Jared Bergman. As a former police officer, former police chief of a sizable city, San Bernardino, California, I just want your reaction to what we've heard today.
You know, my reaction is just disappointment. We talk about lessons learned in this business. We talk about the lessons learned from all of the previous incidents, how to handle them, how to respond, how to manage them. And you know, obviously there's an enormous amount of lessons learned in this particular incident, but we shouldn't be having this conversation. We've had enough of these. We know how to respond. We know what to do. It just wasn't done in this case. And we feared in the days leading up to this, as the narrative kept evolving, that something was very, very wrong with the narrative on this, and things were not lining up. And we knew that eventually this was going to happen. From my own viewpoint and watching this from where I sit, I wish we would have been having this conversation 2 days ago, because they knew these facts 2 days ago, and we'd be beyond the outrage that really built over the last couple of days if they just would have been transparent with it.
That's a great point, and that's on the governor of Texas, either intentionally or unintentionally. He misled Texans, the victims, and the country. But I'd like to follow up, Jared, on something. I'm obviously a layperson, a civilian. I've never been in law enforcement at all, and it sounds to me a terrifying responsibility. When there's an active shooter, you got to go take them out. And I just wondered about what happened here, and these officers who were still hearing gunfire. The timeline of the gunfires after they backed down, there's still shots fired in that classroom. And I just wonder, I guess it's human, right? Are you surprised that they didn't go in?
I am surprised, actually, to be honest with you, and surprised for a number of reasons. So just a personal story. I was a younger police officer when Columbine happened. And I can remember after that incident getting my first bit of active shooter training. And there was this shift in a mindset where we've got these trainers that are telling us, hey, it doesn't matter. Safety protocols go out the window. All the officer safety stuff that you've been trained about, staying safe and retreating and surrounding and perimeter and calling in tactical teams, that is out the window now. It is your responsible to go. You do not have the responsibility. And you realize when you were getting that training that that was very, very different than anything you had previously in your career. And that was it. You put on the badge. It is your responsibility to do it. You hope to God you never have to do it. But when that moment happens, you got to rise to the moment. And in this case, it appears that they did not do it. And it is frightening. And it doesn't surprise me that they didn't do it. What really surprises me is that you have the school district police chief who only has 5 people that work for him. It's a very, very small department, probably not capable in any way, shape, or form of truly responding to something like this effectively, who's running the scene. And it surprises me that as 19, 20, 40, 50, 60 officers are arriving on scene, that somebody else doesn't take over as essentially the commander and make a different call. I can't believe that there wasn't an enormous amount of debate among those officers in the hallway that says, no, this is not a barricaded thing. We have to go in now. And I'm curious to know what that dynamic was, because I gotta believe that there were a number of officers that sat there and said, we're not doing the right thing here. We have to go in.
I mean, that is a question. There would have been. It's human nature. There's children, there's shots being fired. It would seem to me that, especially as you say, if you're wearing the badge, you took the oath, you'd want to go in. Mary Alice, covering the White House for us. We know that President Biden and the First Lady are set to visit the families of the victims and the Uvalde community this weekend. And there is this talk, as there always has been after these school shootings and shootings at groceries and every place else in America, that, hey, maybe we should do something in Congress. What's going to happen?
Yeah, Terry, well, this time we do have about 10 members of the Senate, a bipartisan group that say they're going to work through the Memorial Day weekend on talks. There's, things like universal background checks and red flag laws that are extremely popular with the American people that are on the table. So we'll see if they reach some kind of agreement. I know a lot of my fellow reporters here in Washington, it's so hard because we've just seen this happen before and nothing get done, nothing new passed. I do think this conversation you guys are having right now, though, will put even more attention again on just the style of weapon, the type of weapon. Was that a part of what led some police officers to hesitate here, a fear that they were just outgunned? So much of a conversation in this White House. President Biden likes to bring it up. Just why do we allow for kids so young to be able to purchase such heavy weapons of war so quickly? Large, big, high-scale magazines and body armor and all the accessories of war that go along with these weapons too. And I imagine that some of that will be a part of the conversation, or at least a part of the questions that these lawmakers are going to continue to face.
Absolutely. Those efforts in the past have not resulted in very much, although they did outlaw the bump stock, the modification to the AR rifles that made it more like an automatic weapon, and that has been outlawed. But Aaron, the sense we got from that press conference is that police were worried about being outgunned, as Mary Alice just said. They haven't said that, but it's quite possible. And what does that tell you about American policing right now?
Terry, they are trained to go in, and you heard Director McCraw say that Texas subscribes to the doctrine that Chief Burgwan was describing. When there is an active shooter, you go in. Here, the incident commander seemed to believe this was no longer an active shooter. There were as many as 19 officers that were inside the school. The first couple were taking fire and were hit, and they had to retreat. But there were others that were there that did not breach locked doors. Terry, the police also, I think, are frustrated, and this was reflected in McCraw's comments toward the end, that they couldn't stop this shooter before he even thought about becoming a school shooter. And he relayed the social media posts that began in September of last year, where the suspect appears to have been asking a sister to buy him a gun. She refused. But then a couple of months later, in February of this year, the suspect is starting to be described on social media as a potential school shooter. Then on March 3rd, I hear you're buying a gun. That's word on the street, one post to him said. March 14th, 10 more days, he posts, and the user replies, you're going to shoot up a school? So there were these digital red flags that law enforcement officials have been uncovering. Just nobody was able to connect the dots.
And I wonder, and if I could go back to Jared for a moment on this. First, I should note that you, after that training, did have an experience with the 2015 San Bernardino mass shooting there. And so we're drawing on that experience as well. There's a lot of talk about red flag laws. They operate a little differently than just searching people's social media. But I wonder, and I've said this before, you go online, you're shopping for something, you click on it, instantly you're getting ads in all of your social media feeds, junk texts, email. They track you, they flag you, and they send that information to merchants. Why can't they do that with somebody who's talking about shooting up schools or who had tortured and killed animals and talked about it online? I wonder how much that might help from your perspective.
Well, I don't know the laws that dictate, what is shared, what is shared outside of the marketing environment. I will tell you from a law enforcement standpoint, we don't have access to any database that says that a certain person is doing these types of things or somebody's engaged in it. From a law enforcement standpoint, what we rely on is the public or somebody bringing something to us. The size of social media, the scope of it, the mass size of communication is something beyond the scope of individual law enforcement agencies being able to monitor. We rely on people to report things to us, and then it is incumbent upon us to take certain actions to intervene, to help, to get somebody out of crisis. We rely on the mental health care system. We rely on the criminal justice system. We work within the confines of the tools that we have. But it requires somebody to come to us and say, hey, I'm really concerned. This is what I'm seeing. This is what is happening. And it appears in this case that the folks that may have been aware of those conversations were not reporting it to law enforcement.
Right. And that is a very good explanation of how law enforcement works. It is the 21st century, and there are ways for the social media companies to try, if somebody makes a bad joke and they get banned. I mean, they certainly are watching everything that's on their platforms. And you would think that they would be able to have some kind of filter and then a human check on it for this kind of dangerous activity. But I want to go back to Mary Alice on the NRA. So former President Trump, Senator Ted Cruz, other prominent Republicans scheduled to speak at the NRA's convention in Houston today. Now, Greg Abbott and his lieutenant governor have canceled their planned attendance, but I guess Abbott is going to address the group virtually. So the timing has got to be awkward for the NRA, or maybe not. They've defied all, Sandy Hook, you name it. Every time you think that there's a sense that we can't go on with the gun laws that we have and the gun culture we have, just rolls off their backs like water off a duck's back. So tell us about the NRA convention and what to expect with it.
Yeah, I think you laid out a lot of it. We're going to hear from these prominent Republicans that are still planning to speak. There was a lot of political pressure over the last few days for the NRA to potentially postpone or at least cancel. So far, no indications that they're really scaling back. We are expecting quite a lot of protesters, quite a lot of gun safety advocates to make sure that their presence is known as well. But you're right, in a lot of ways, the NRA has actually sort of moved the goalpost here. They have answered every mass shooting with a political argument that more guns is the answer. Guns all the time, everywhere, unfettered access. And it struck me, too, just how the political pressure that has been put on some of these Republican lawmakers to really expand that kind of access. Like I'm thinking about, I was just over this last weekend in Georgia and in Texas, new laws passed, for example, to have permitless concealed carry. Those are things that are actually really unpopular when you poll sort of the general public, unpopular even among gun holders, among Republicans, but this small sliver of extremely politically active members that have continued to push these governors to just make it easier for people not only to buy weapons, any weapons, but to be able to carry them at all times.
Exactly. It is the extremely energized base of the gun rights advocates who have blocked the majority's will. 90-some%, upwards of 90% of Americans want universal background checks, not just for sales between licensed dealers and private individuals, but private sales, of which there are a great many in the country, and the red flag laws as well. So, Aaron, where does this investigation go now? What are they looking for?
Well, I think the Uvalde Independent School District police chief, who was the incident commander that wrongly assumed this was a barricaded situation that posed no more threat to children, has a lot to answer for. And the Department of Public Safety even sort of deferred and said, you're welcome to reach out and call him. I think people should be calling. And we'll see whether this even becomes a federal investigation into the law enforcement response. There are still a number of questions about the timeline that police will undoubtedly fill in, but we have the picture now of why police waited so long. It was just an error in judgment, and one that may well have cost children their lives.
It's hard to think about, but Aaron, what's the federal role here?
Well, the FBI special agent in charge in San Antonio said there really isn't one beyond a support role, because they are not in charge of the scene. But behind the scenes, we know they've been working with the Texas Department of Public Safety to trace the weapons, to look at the background of the shooter. They've offered technical expertise. We're not sure how much Texas is taking them up on this, but we have seen the feds before take on police departments that are accused of failings, and they can do an investigation into whether there's a pattern or a practice of systemic failures like the one that seems to have occurred here. They can intervene. We're not sure any criminal charges would result, of course, but they can reform police departments so that they don't make these kinds of mistakes.
Well, we have to hope in the future that we learn from this, as Jared was saying. Aaron, Mary Alice, Jared, thanks very much for that.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.